Hey, what's up guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist, and today we're going to be doing a vampire test hand video. So I'm really excited for this one because you guys have been requesting like crazy for me to do a vampire deck that didn't use Zombie World and actually uses Vampire Kingdom. So this is a pure as possible build that only uses three Unizombie, Shiranui Solitaire, and Mizuki in the deck of monsters that are not vampires, well, and Ash Blossom. But you play all sorts of really cool monsters in this deck that you can actually summon out that are all vampires to be able to get you some awesome monsters out in the field like Ultimate to Zulkin, your copy of Vampire Sheridan, or Vampire Braum from the extra deck, or get some really cool synchro monsters out. So, without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell next so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below because we have some awesome rewards you guys, like getting your name description for every single video, getting assigned cards in the mail, or even getting requested deck profile every single month that you're a patron along with test hands. So without further ado, let's get straight on into this. So let's go ahead and shuffle the deck up and see what we can actually pull off. We're going to go ahead and pile shuffle as well, just to make sure that we get the deck good and mixed up. But like I said, a lot of you guys have been actually requesting me to build a pure vampire deck that didn't use the Zombie World engine. I like the Zombie World engine in a lot of zombie decks, but I wanted to try out this deck one time without it again, just to see how well it could actually function, and it really worked. It really worked without using that Zombie World engine. It's really good. Like, the Zombie World engine is insanely good in any of the zombie decks, but I wanted to see how well it would work without using it. So let's go ahead and see what we can pull off. So let's go ahead and shuffle the deck up and see what we can do. So we're going to go ahead and draw into a copy of the Ash Blossom, Vampire Domain, Scarlet Scourge, Vampire Shadow, and hopefully a monster we can normal summon, which is called By the Grave. Now you can normal summon the Ash Blossom if you need to, but I recommend against it. So if we're going second, because we have a bad hand, you get another copy of Domain, which is still not the greatest in the world, but if you wanted to go first and you had to do it, you could normal summon out the copy of Ash Blossom, activate the copy of Domain, tribute the copy of Ash Blossom because you could activate this to normal summon an additional vampire, summon out your copy of Shadow. Shadow's effect would trigger. If your opponent tried to Ash Blossom you have the Call by the Grave to ditch against your opponent, and then you could special summon out a vampire from your deck, which could be something like a copy of Vampire Lord, which we play as a one of in this deck. I probably just totally skipped over it. Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and special summon out a copy of Vampire Lord to our side of the field, and then overlay these two monsters to go in for a copy of our Crimson Knight Vampire Braum. So this is very, very, very simplistic in the way that you actually play that particular field. But you just want to get that monster out as quickly as possible as a defensive play. Now, if we go into our next turn, we're going to draw into an Awakening, which you could then set. And then you could attack your opponent with the copy of the Vampire Braum. If your opponent has a monster in the graveyard, then you can also activate its effect to detach material from this card to target a monster in your opponent's graveyard and special summon it to your side of the field. But if you do, only that monster can attack. So you have to do something like this, where you discard your copy of Vampire Shadow or Lord, steal the opponent's monster, and then tribute it to summon out a copy of Scarlet Scourge, which they would then bring back your copy of Vampire Shadow, because then you get to loop them back out, but none of your monsters could attack that turn. So it's a little bit of a defensive play, and it would take a little while to get going with a hand like that, but it's not unheard of to get a hand like that with the amount of tribute summon monsters we're actually playing in the deck. But when this deck pops off, it is absolutely insane. But sometimes you just get hands like that where you'll get where you still get to summon something, but it's not the most optimal hand. So let's go ahead and draw. Now we're okay. We got a Retainer, Fraulein, Desires, Mizuki, and a copy of our Vampire Sorcerer. We don't have our Unizombie access, but we still have plenty of plays that we can go into in this particular field. So you could do something very simplistic, like normal summon a copy of your Vampire Sorcerer face down, pass turn, and when your opponent passes turn, or you could even leave it face up, activate your copy of Vampire Desire, and then target this card on the field, and then send a vampire from your deck to the graveyard, which could be a copy of Vampire Familiar, which then you could kind of loop off your copy of your Retainer. Now this will become level 1, so keep that in mind. You can special summon this card back to your side of the field by paying 500 and then sending your Vampire Retainer from your deck to the graveyard. And then you get to search a monster from your deck. You get to search any vampire monster that you want from your deck to your hand. Now we already have the best one, which is our copy of the Vampire Fraulein, but you could search something like a copy of Vampire Shadow if you want to get something really helpful to be able to get additional plays on your side of the field. Now if you really want to go in with this particular field, you have more plays that you could go into. If you wanted to play it a little bit more defensively, instead of searching the copy of Vampire Shadow because you have the Fraulein in your hand, you could search a copy of Vampire Retainer and then ditch it to the graveyard to summon a copy of another monster. Or you could let's see, can you send Retainer for Retainer? Let's see, you can send one Vampire. Yeah, you can. So we're going to send a copy of Retainer for Retainer. You could then special summon Retainer, send this to graveyard, pay the 500, search Domain, or Domination. Domination would probably be the best one to search to be able to get it out on your side of the field as quickly as possible. Or you could search Domain or Domination. It totally depends on which one you want to grab. I probably would grab out the copy of Domination just to have an additional negation on my field, which would be super helpful. Now keep in mind, these two, if they're sent to the graveyard, are going to be banished. But this is level 1, this is also level 1, and this is a level 2. So I would probably go ahead and link summon these two together, which will banish themselves, and special summon out a copy of Vampire Sucker to your side of the field, because sometimes you need the suck. Set your copy of Domination, and you can pass with that particular field if you want to. And then if your copy of Vampire Sorcerer gets destroyed, then you could search a Vampire card, which can be a copy of Scarlet Scourge if you want to grab your copy of Scarlet Scourge, because it's going to be really easy to summon. And if they destroy that by battle or they attack into it, you could special summon out your Fraulein, and you also have a negation face down. So you have basically a battle trap that's going to protect you, and you have a copy of an Infernity Barrier that if it's a monster that negates, it's going to gain you're going to gain life points equal to the amount that you lost. So let's go ahead and shuffle up and see what we can do. Again, I'm actually going to go ahead and show you guys the really cool combo that you can actually get Ultimaya to Zulkin out on your side of the field and get some really good plays. It doesn't have to be a precise hand, but let's just see if we can pull it out of the deck really quick. So what you're going to want to have is maybe a copy of Vampire Retainer, a copy of your Vampire Domain, a copy of a Unizombie, and maybe a Familiar. Well, you can send the Familiar from deck to graveyard off the Unizombie. So something like this. And then the other two monsters in your hand don't super matter, but we're going to go ahead and say any other spell or trap. Let's just say that. We'll have that in our hand just to get you a really good kind of balance with this deck, because you're going to get to search a spell or trap in here, and then if you have any other vampire in your hand, it's going to help you out quite a lot. So we're going to hope we draw another vampire, which is going to be Duke. So this is fine. This is a good hand. So I know because I built it, but let's go ahead and do this. So we're going to go ahead and normal summon the copy of Unizombie, ditch this card from our hand, and ditch a vampire from the deck to increase it to a level 5, which is going to be Familiar. Once you get those two monsters out from your hand and out from your field, you can go ahead and do some really simplistic plays. You can do some really neat stuff too. So once you get those in the graveyard, you can go ahead and use the copy of your Vampire Retainer or your Familiar in the graveyard, special summon it back to your side of the field, and summon Duke from send Duke from your hand to the graveyard. Now the Familiar is going to get you a search from the deck, which can be a copy of your Vampire Shadow. Once you get Vampire Shadow on your side of the field, you're going to get some really good plays. So keep in mind, this is a level 5 tuner now, because you've increased it by 1 time and 2 times with the Retainer and the Familiar. Now you can use the copy of Domain to be able to tribute your copy of Vampire Familiar, or you can hold on and get another search. Send this, special summon this. Use its effect by sending if this card is in your graveyard, then you get to send a vampire from your hand or your field to the graveyard, but if it's going to be sent to the graveyard, it's banished instead. So you get a search. So once you get that search, we're going to grab a copy of our Vampire's Awakening. Once you grab Vampire's Awakening, you can get an additional really neat play. So we're going to go ahead and search off, let's see. You can go ahead and activate the copy of Domain, tribute off your copy of Retainer, special summon out your copy of Shadow. Shadow will use its effect and special summon out a Vampire from your deck, which can be a copy of your Scarlet Scourge, which then you can pay 1,000 life points, and the Scarlet Scourge will special summon back the Duke, which will then hit your opponent and, you know, take a card out of their deck, which usually I call traps against my opponent, because it hits an impermanence, or it lets me have the knowledge if they have an infinite impermanence in their deck at all. Keep in mind, level 5. So, now that we've done that, we can use these two monsters on our side of the field to go into a copy of Ultimaya to Zulkin. Now, set your copy of Vampire Domain. Once you set that copy of Vampire Domain, and if you instead of adding the copy of Awakening, you could add Desires, and you could get into another Xyz play. Let's go ahead and do that. So set the copy of Domain, and then summon out a copy of Void Ogre, or a copy of Crystal Wing. It's totally dependent on you. I'm going to summon out the copy of Void Ogre to give me additional spell and trap negation, because I have the copy of Domination set, which is going to help me out a lot more. Activate your copy of your Vampire Desires, and then you can use your copy of your Scarlet Scourge. Send a copy of Vampire Lord, making this level 5, and then you can really easily overlay both of these monsters on your side of the field and summon out a copy of Braum as well. So you get this really nice field on your side, where you're going to have a negation on your side of the field, you're going to have a negation, you're going to have 2 negations on your side of the field, and every time your vampire does damage, you're going to get to draw a card. So if we draw for turn, we draw into an Ash, which is not going to super help us all that much, but you also have this negation right here. You can take a monster out of your opponent's graveyard, and you have a negation of a spell or trap, and this is what I call the insane field of getting out in vampires. Now, if you were to draw out a copy of literally any spell or trap from your deck, if you draw another copy of Domain, it doesn't matter what spell or trap you draw, you can just set it with Zulkin on your field and special summon out an additional Synchro Dragon monster, which your options are Beals, Void Ogre, and your copy of Crystal Wing to get out on your side of the field. It just depends on the situation that you're going into. And you can get these insane fields pretty easily. All you really had to have in your hand was a copy of Unizombie or Shiranui Solitaire, either Vampire Retainer or a copy of Familiar, either of those, and a spell or trap in your hand to get those cards out on the field. So basically, either of these and then this gets you pretty much the field that you're looking for. So let's go ahead and see what we can do for this next hand. So go ahead and shuffle up the deck. Make sure you didn't put any extra deck monsters in your deck really quickly. I don't think I did. No, okay. Go ahead and shuffle the deck up really quick. See what you can actually get out with this next test hand. We dropped our copy of Familiar. The bat is running. Let's go ahead and see what we can do. So, for the next test hand, we're going to go ahead and draw a new copy of Retainer, a copy of Ash Blossom, Vampire Takeover, Vampire Familiar, and a copy of Vampire Awakening. So you have some really cool plays you can do with this hand too. Normal summon out a copy of Familiar, and then immediately use the Familiar on your side of the field to special summon out a copy of Link Rebo. Now, since this is in the graveyard, if this card is special summoned, you get to add 1 vampire monster from your deck to your hand, except another copy of itself. And if this card is in the graveyard, then you can send a vampire card from your hand to or from your field to the graveyard to special summon this card, but banish it when it leaves the field. So go ahead, special summon it back by sending from your hand to the graveyard a copy of Retainer. Retainer will then trigger, letting you add from your deck to your hand with the Familiar a monster, which can be any monster you particularly want. I usually add Shadow or Scarlet Scourge. If I have a monster in the graveyard, I add Scarlet Scourge. If I add a copy of Shadow, though, it gives me additional plays. So we're going to go ahead and add the copy of Shadow from our graveyard or from our deck to our hand, and then set on your side of the field the copy of Takeover and the copy of your Awakening. So pass your field to your opponent, and then you can use your plays on your opponent's turn. Go ahead and activate the copy of Takeover. Takeover will then activate a copy of your Vampire Kingdom on your side of the field, which is super helpful to get Vampire Kingdom out as quickly as possible. Special summons out your copy of Retainer, which will not be banished, and it lets you search a spell or trap, which can be Domain or your Domination. I would grab the copy of Domain just to give me additional summons on my turn. And then you also have the copy of Vampire Awakening that you can activate on your opponent's turn to get you an additional search, which is going to be super helpful to special summon out a copy of Familiar, because the monster is going to get destroyed during the end phase. You get to special summon out a copy, or add from your deck to your hand, a monster now, because you add the Domain, you get to add a monster. So let's go ahead and add from our deck a vampire monster, which I would probably add Scarlet Scourge. I would probably add the Scarlet Scourge from my deck to my hand, or you could add another copy of Retainer, because the Retainer and the Familiar, that these two are not going to get banished, but this one will. So you could add a copy of your Vampire Retainer. Well, no, I probably would add the Scarlet Scourge. I wouldn't mind sending it from hand to graveyard anyways if I need to summon out one of my two monsters. So then during the end phase, this will be destroyed and you can negate an attack with this, and then you also have the Ash to slow your opponent down with. So you have some pretty good plays to deal with your opponent's stuff. Now if you draw for turn, you're going to draw into a copy of Desires. Now Vampire Desires in this particular hand is going to be pretty good. This deck is about the grind game. That's why I'm showing you guys turn 3s and stuff like that. Now keep in mind, this one will not be banished, but this will. So we can go ahead and tribute this and get it out of the way and banish it just so it's off the field. Go ahead and you can use your copy of your Vampire Shadow. Special summon from your deck a copy of Vampire Duke, or instead of summoning the Vampire Duke, before you even summon the Shadow, you can go for a different play. You can summon out your copy of your Scarlet Scourge, which will get you an additional search. Go ahead and summon out the copy of Scarlet Scourge. This will banish. The copy of Scarlet Scourge will trigger special summoning out a copy of Familiar, and if Familiar is special summoned, it reads right here that if this card's in your graveyard, you can send a vampire, or if this card is special summoned, you can pay 500 and then add a vampire from your deck to your hand. You pay a 500 and then you get to add a vampire card from your deck to your hand, or you can even go for a cool play. Instead of summoning this here, you can back up and then activate Desires and send a monster that you want to revive to your side of the field, like a copy of Familiar, and then you could summon out your copy of Scarlet Scourge and then bring out your copy of Frolin to your side of the field instead. And then you would also get your additional play as well, where this card would become level 5. Now you could pay your dominance cost of 500, tribute out your copy of Retainer, use your copy of Shadow. Shadow will then trigger special summoning from your deck a vampire monster, which is going to help out quite a lot to be able to special summon out something as simple as maybe, I don't know. You could even get a monster off your opponent's side of the field. If you didn't send Frolin and you sent Vamp, you could special summon the Vamp to your side of the field, and then when Shadow's normal summon, you get to take an opponent's monster, which is another play that you could do. When you summon out the copy of your Vampire Shadow, you could special summon out your copy of Retainer. Retainer's effect will trigger, pay 500, and then get your copy of Domination on your side of the field, so you have a negation. And then, since this is level 7 now, you can link summon if you want to, or you can just go with this, and the copy of Vamp will take an opponent's monster off their side of the field, which is going to be super helpful. You have a negation on field, and you have all these monsters as well. If you want to summon out a copy of a linked monster, you could link these two together if you want to, and go for a Vampire Sucker if you want to go for that. And then you could pass with a field like this. You have a negation, you have the Vamp that can take monsters, and you have the Scarlet Scourge, which is going to help out. You can do something simple like this, normal summon the Vampire Familiar, and as long as Vamp's attack points are lower than the monster she's trying to take, you just get to equip it back to her. So Familiar could be normal summoned, and then you get to send it to grave, and then go from there with a copy of Retainer, and then keep going. I mean, there's just so many plays that this deck can do, as you guys can see, just on its own, which is really, really, really fun. So I think that's going to do it for here, guys, for this particular test hand video. As you can see, vampires work well by themselves, which is what I was trying to show you guys. This deck is really fun to play around with. I get lost when I play this deck because it's just fun to play. Like, I just love seeing the boards that I can make and seeing how well it can work. And especially when you incorporate playing against your opponent. When you summon out something of your opponent's side of the field, by using your copy of Sheridan, you can just really get some insane plays to really help out quite a lot, especially with your Scarlet Scourge. To be able to special summon a monster, vampire monster in your graveyard, it's just going to help out so much with it just walking into other plays like your copy of Sheridan. So that's it for this video, guys. I hope you guys really enjoyed this one. I really enjoyed taking this one for you guys because I love vampires. It was one of the decks that I've played for a very, very, very long time and a lot of different variants of vampires. So anyways, guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell on there so you can come part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below because we have some awesome rewards for you guys, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.